The representation of nerd culture in film has changed drastically over the turn of the 21st century, and has grown and expanded far beyond the reaches of its pre-existing stigma. Throughout this video, me and my partner will be discussing how different forms of media have portrayed the nerd subculture, and how these portrayals have guided the perception of how nerds and geeks are viewed as a whole by both audiences and filmmakers.
Crank up the music! It's time to do the Urkel!
Nerd characters can be seen dating back from as early as the 1960s. Notable early nerd characters include the 1963 Nutty Professor Julius Kelp, Happy Days' Potsy and Ralph, and Steve Urkel.
Did I do that?
Many viewers nowadays could see these depictions as offensive stereotyping that set the precedent on how nerd characters were written for years to come. This precedent extended itself into the English language, with multiple dictionary definitions of the words nerd and geek always having negative connotations. The Oxford Dictionary defines a nerd as a person who is boring, stupid, and not fashionable.
I thought the measures were going to be the stars of the show. Turns out it was the weights.
Media such as Revenge of the Nerds and Weird Science came out in the mid-1980s and depicted nerds as the protagonist. This portrayal had an effect on the ways society viewed nerds and allowed for media to include more positive depictions of the nerd-type character, although many nerd-type characters still lacked nuance. As technologies progressed and advanced, nerds were no longer left in their fortresses of solitude. With the invention of the internet, many nerds were easily able to utilize their tech-savvy skills to go on the net and talk to one another. Online discussion forums were made, and the once shunned nerds began claiming their territory among society, using their technological intelligence to their advantage. During an interview with USA Today, Marvel Studios CEO Avi Arad said, "I used to hate the internet. I thought it was just a place where people stole our ideas. I now consider them as filmmaking partners."
Along with the development of technology, young and talented filmmakers like Kevin Smith and Edgar Wright started making movies and TV shows centered around a group of young nerdy protagonists with more nuance and depth than many iterations beforehand, not presenting them as caricatures, but as real people. With these directors gaining critical acclaim, it became a necessity to watch these films, spreading their positive images to a greater audience than ever before. This can be seen in Kevin Smith's debut film, Clerks, starring Brian O'Halloran and Jeff Anderson as lazy convenience store clerks, discussing topics like comics and Star Wars in interesting and sometimes insightful ways.
What did you like better, Jedi or The Empire Strikes Back?
This was something rarely seen at the time. Kevin Smith and other filmmakers began using these cultural references as a stylistic trademark, drawing in those nerdy viewers and giving them something to truly relate to. As stated by Oliver Lee Bateman in the Paris Review, Kevin Smith's romantic comedy Chasing Amy, now almost 2 decades old, was a big deal for my generation of nerds. Back in 1997, all of our dorky interests, from comic books to video games, remained hidden, far from the prying eyes of the American mainstream. To us, the unapologetic fanboy Smith had emerged as something of a nerd culture Shakespeare. After establishing the nerd subculture in a more positive light, along with the large success of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, a shift started to form in the film industry, as big companies decided to gear films towards a more nerdy audience, knowing that these dedicated fans would bring in large amounts of money in the box office, with additional sales or merchandise. It was essentially a big brand's monetary dream. This shift only grew, and with more superhero and Star Wars films being released at an increasingly rapid pace, it led to these films growing in popularity, eventually taking over the mainstream, changing how nerds and nerd culture are viewed as a whole.